Hi, and welcome to the Painfully Faithful podcast. I'm your host, Maria McCarg, and I'm so excited to be back with you guys. We have some really inspiring episodes coming up over the next few months, and I'm just equally or even more excited about today's episode with a dear friend of mine and a hero to me and someone that I love so much. Kristen Lamb. She's going to be sharing her story with us and just talking about having an eternal perspective and how she trusts God. So thank you, Kristen, so much for being on the podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to get to spend this time with you.
Awesome. I really feel so honored to have you here today. I'm just really excited for what's in store for everybody listening in. And I just wanted to share a little bit about Kristen, her and her husband, Mike. How long have you guys been married?
Ooh, we have been married 24 years now.
Ooh, wow, 24 years.
Yes, so
Congratulations.
next year is a big one, a big anniversary.
Aw, yeah, that's awesome. And Mike and Kristen have four great kids stemming from third grade to college.
Yep,
So
big span.
big span. That's a wild ride. But Kristen, what is it like to do third grade math and college applications at the same time? How do you do
All
it?
at the same time. It is pretty crazy. It's funny. Last week, I was actually out in Seattle, Washington, where my oldest attends college. I was
Wow.
helping her move into her apartment for the year. And so, because of that, I missed the back to school night at the elementary school. So, it's kind of weird, like when your schedules collide in that
Yeah.
way. But it's fun. It helps us stay young but also be aware of how old we are at the same time. I don't know.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great. I have a lot of respect for you and Mike and all that you do in your family, for the youth and family, in the church. And I know Mike and Kristen have just been partners with Cash and I in ministry for a while now. I think it's been 10 years that we have been together. And so
Wow.
I'm just grateful for the friendship and the partnership and
Same.
even like the kindred spirit that we share just going through hard times and difficulties to be able to be there isn't it is something I'm really grateful for. So just to get started, Kristen, just wanted to ask you, just I know the last year of your life and Mike's life, it's an understatement to say that it has been very difficult. And I have been very inspired and in awe of your guys' faith over this last year. And so I just wanted to ask if you would share your journey with us and how you stayed faithful through the last year, or not just the last year, but you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, now that we're settling into a new school year, it's exciting, but it also brings up a lot of memories of where were we at exactly 1 year ago. Um,
Mhm.
it was the end of the summer last year when Michael started experiencing a lot of sickness. And then through testing, we discovered that he had stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma, which is a incurable cancer that his particular version or specialty of it, his particular case with it had a really poor prognosis with the type that he had. The life expectancy was usually like a matter of months. So getting that news, we literally got that diagnosis about a week before our daughter was going to be heading back to her second year of college. Um, was very disorienting. It definitely caught us off guard. It was all of a sudden lots of time in a doctor's office, visiting different doctors, finding out what treatments they could offer. The first doctor that we saw at our local hospital helped us understand that at that hospital, the only form of treatment that they could offer was chemotherapy, which would be something that he wouldn't be a good candidate for because he had gone through leukemia when he was 6, and that treatment caused damage to his heart. So
Yeah.
he really couldn't go through chemo anymore. And so we got open doors. We were able to visit a team at Mass General down in Boston who let us know about a clinical trial that they were accepting patients into. And so we signed him up with that. He started a couple weeks later. And where we're at right now is it's incredible. His cancer is at an undetectable level right now. He went through about 8 months of infusion treatments, and then
Mhm.
he does like a just oral medicine at home every day. But we are very, very grateful for where things are at right now. We feel incredibly blessed. We feel like it's a miracle that God provided. We see the way that He led us to even this clinical trial and the steps that they're taking there. And even that with this treatment, it's not like chemo in that it's not as hard on his body. And so he's been able
Mhm.
to continue to work and minister and be the dad that he wants to be to our kids. But it's certainly 1 year ago right now, we were facing, uh, wow, I was thinking about, is this the end? I was thinking about how maybe I will only have a marriage for 23 years, 24 years, and then maybe the rest of my life I'm going to be a widow. I had a hard time sleeping at night just thinking about, okay, do I need to start taking steps to prepare to be a single mom? And definitely the hardest thing I think was just thinking about how my kids were going to handle it. I felt confident. Michael's in good hands. His faith is strong. He's going to be fine. If his physical life is over, I know he's going to be with God. I felt very confident that I'm with God. I'm in his hands. But worrying about how losing their father would affect each one of my kids was very overwhelming. I think
Yeah.
that was the hardest thing, thinking about with each one of them, Xander at that point being 7 years old. But even my oldest, just starting her adult life, how is this going to shape their view of God?
Yeah.
How would they handle such a loss in their life? Would it affect their faith? Would they still be able to be faithful? Would they still turn to God? Um, so there's a lot of fears, a lot of even practical, like in the middle of the night, thinking about how am I going to afford to like make the house payments on my own? Should I start
Mhm.
packing? Because there were certainly lots of sleepless nights. And then I was thinking, well, I might as well start doing something that's going to prepare
Aw.
me for this next stage. So thinking about maybe I should start packing, figuring out what I can sell because I'm sure we're going to have to downsize. Like it was very
Wow.
real to me that life is going to change, and I felt like I had to surrender Michael. I had to surrender my husband and be okay with be okay with facing the future without him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's intense. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think something that I really appreciate about this podcast is that, you see kind of someone on the outside or even sharing a little bit of the story, the difficulties we go through, but even sharing just the depth, it's a depth of vulnerability of the thoughts you had in the middle of the night and thinking about should I pack or how do I prepare my kids? Like those are like that's so real. And I think all of us that go through different trials, like we have these thoughts that we kind of keep to ourselves that you don't talk about, as you go about your regular day, but it's so real. So thank you for sharing that. But I also just wanted to ask, like what are like how did you stay faithful through it? How are you staying faithful? Like, what are some lessons you've learned or things that you've held on to um, during this time?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely, a daily battle, right? And I think I felt the struggle every day to just be at peace. I felt, my heart rate quicken
Mhm.
a lot. There was just that constant like pit in my stomach of
Yeah.
sadness. And it felt like it was just constant prayers every day of God, give me what I need for today. I can't
Mhm.
think about tomorrow. I don't know what is going to come. I don't know. I don't even know how I'm going to make it through whatever is coming, but help me have the strength that I need for today, to be at peace today, to be okay with what's happening today,
Yeah.
and to make the most of today. And so I feel like it was such a great yeah, walking time with God. And I think I was even aware of that at the
Mhm.
time. God, I know that these are the times when it says that God is close to the brokenhearted. I definitely felt like
Yeah.
brokenhearted with that news, but I knew that, okay, this is a time when I can really call on God to give me what I need, my daily bread, to
Mhm.
sustain me for each day, to not just give way to despair and to not just give way to all the anxiety and
Mhm.
questions. Yeah, I think overall, the biggest things, one of my favorite things is thinking about heaven, is thinking about eternity and how much strength I get from knowing that in the end, everything is going to be good.
Mhm.
God created this world to be good, to reflect his goodness, to reflect his perfection. And what we're living in right now is far from that. It's
Right.
broken. There's pain, there's cancer, there's illness, there's disappointment, there's struggles, all these things that aren't God's intention. It's not how he created it to be. But I think the more I look at what he says heaven is going to be and what he says about what is to come, that makes me feel at peace with what's
Mhm.
going on around me. That, yep, it's not fair. It's not easy. It's not how God wants it to be. And it's also not going to stay that way forever. So I think I get a lot of hope from just having that eternal perspective.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I could share, I think
Yeah.
in particular, when I think about like recently I was reading Revelation chapter 4 and 5. I think
Mhm.
those are some of my favorites. Also Revelations chapter 21 and 22. But in Revelations chapter 4, God gives John this vision of the throne room. He gets to
Mhm.
get a glimpse of God sitting on his throne, and he sees and he witnesses all of the majesty. He sees, the
Mhm.
elders on their thrones fall out of their thrones and bow down to God and say their praises to God. And it says day and night, they say nonstop, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And
Wow.
honestly, for me, just to like set my heart and my mind and to try to imagine what that looks like, what that sounds like, I can't wait to hear the praises in heaven.
Mhm.
But it just gives my heart peace knowing that God is on his throne Again,
Mm,
things are messed up and chaotic all around me, but God is on his throne and ultimately the victory is his and everything's going to be okay. And I think it reminds me God is big, bigger than the challenges, bigger than the hurts, bigger than the uncertainty. And it brings me security and comfort, remembering how great God is on his throne. And then
mm,
also in the next chapter, in Revelation chapter 5, it talks about how there's a scroll and John is weeping because there's nobody who's worthy of opening the scroll. And then Jesus enters, right?
mm,
The slain lamb comes in and he's worthy to open the scroll. He's the only one. And I
mm,
think for me, that reminds me that God has a plan. We can weep as we look around at the brokenness of the world and all of the
yeah,
things that just aren't right. But God has a perfect plan. His plan
mm,
is his son. And his plan involves suffering. Jesus is the one who suffered first. He laid down his life, but because of that, he's worthy to open the scroll to bring God's plan into fruition where I get to be with him, where I
mm,
get to be reunited with him. And so I think just thinking about also everything that God did so that I could be near to him, so that he could draw near to me,
mm,
also brings me a lot of peace in the times when life just feels very overwhelming.
mm. Thank you so much for sharing just your heart, your convictions. I love that. I was gonna ask you like follow-up question, like how do you picture heaven? And I think you definitely like describe that. It's like a lot through revelations of imagining God on his throne, and the praises. Is there anything else that you like think about when you think about heaven or imagine that?
Yeah, so I think definitely thinking about the throne room again, I guess for me, part of it is picturing it, but part of it is trying to hear it. As somebody who loves music, uh,
Yeah.
I want to hear angels singing. I want to know what that sounds like. I know the beauty and the power of like a huge chorus singing in like perfect harmony.
Mm,
So what would that sound like if angels were doing that? Like, I don't know. I like
wow.
to imagine that. I also like to think about how in Revelation 21, it talks about like the new heaven and the new earth, and
Mm,
thinking about how amazing our earth is. It's beautiful, but yet it's it's the old creation that's going to be done away with, and how there's going to be a new earth and a new heaven brought together in the new creation. And just wondering, is heaven going to look a lot like this, a lot like earth, with the incredible waterfalls and majestic mountains and beautiful beaches, except perfect, except
yeah.
unmarred by anything that our sin or anything is done. And so I like to think about that too, of being able to, like, again, taking the beauty of God's creation around us, but imagining what that might
Mm,
look like in a perfected state.
mm.
It's really fun to think about.
That's awesome. So I think about like so much of the stress and anxiety that comes from hardship is kind of like my mind wandering. And
Mm.
so trying to, like the Bible talks about taking our thoughts captive and to instead imagine just the beauty and the majestic of heaven. That's a really good practical in going through hardship and having eternal perspective, having a godly perspective over a negative, faithless perspective. And there's also this song by Charity Gale called Endless Praise. And
Mm.
she talks about that. This is what she talks about, like singing holy, 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 just um, imagining heaven through all the heartache and pain right now, but being able to imagine, even when we feel hopeless, we could have hope, imagining heaven. But then also the second thing he talks about of like God being close to the brokenhearted and how God is close to you and near you. I really I wrote down because I was like struck by you saying like that God or that Jesus suffered first.
Mm.
Because when you're going through suffering, to it I don't know, it's hard for me sometimes in the moment. I can know up here, like I can know in my mind God has a plan, but how do I know that in my heart? Like to continue to trust God and be faithful. I think that when we go through our own hardships and suffering, that, we want to keep going one day at a time. But how do you do that faithfully when you don't know what the plan is? And so for you is thinking that Jesus suffered first. Is that something that, like, how did you do that? Like, how do you, like, is there any other things that help you kind of keep that faithful perspective?
Yeah. I think it is something that I think about a lot, even in the middle of the pain and discomfort. I think there are times when whether it's going through and picking up a gospel and reading through an account of the crucifixion, and reading about what Jesus went through, or just getting into a solitary space, closing my eyes and picturing Jesus hanging on the cross and
Wow.
me at the foot of the cross, like looking up at him. That's something that I do often that helps me kind of keep that perspective of seeing what Jesus went through. But I do think that it's a really powerful exercise
Mm.
to think about Jesus's suffering. I think that
Yeah.
as it helps me feel okay with suffering because Jesus's suffering was so great. And yet that was the victorious plan. And I think it's so
Mm.
countercultural because so much of our culture, right, is built on avoiding suffering.
Yeah.
And escaping the pain, and everything is built around that. And so
Mhm.
it's so different to instead, I think, be okay with it and to see it as something great that Jesus did that is going to be a part of my walk also. Um, yeah, I don't know.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think they're really great practicals, like to think about. It also a call higher for me, just to think through that because it's so true. I think even for me, living with chronic pain and nerve damage, um, and just the spinal cord damage, I could think through like, how do I get rid of the pain? Or in the moment that I'm feeling intense pain, like trying to understand it. Like, why am I feeling this? Did I do something? Did I do more activity that kind of caused this pain? Or I'm trying to understand it so I could try to get rid of it. And so I think this is something that like I want to try this, like even in the moment of feeling intense pain, like try again taking my thoughts captive to think about Jesus because it's so true. I mean, it's so like, oh yeah, think about Jesus, but really like, but on a deeper level, even like you said, like reading through a gospel, I'm thinking sometimes when I'm feeling intense pain of listening, putting on the Bible app and listening. So maybe even listening to like a crucifixion account because when I really am in touch with that, I think like, wow, like I know what I'm experiencing right now feels intense, but it's nothing like what Jesus went through.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's
so, yeah, so that really helps perspective, talking all about this faithful perspective, eternal perspective. I feel like that's really helpful. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know I'm like, wow, that is a blessing to me to be able to take this away from just this conversation, something that I want to try.
It's a
doing. So,
great reminder to us all, and you are definitely such an inspiration to me. I think
aw,
it's, I look at yeah, I have a hard time imagining facing kind of the physical pain and suffering every day. So I can't really imagine, but I do. I'm so grateful for Jesus's example and that plan did involve suffering. And so I think for all of us, whether our suffering is a
mm,
physical pain, it's an emotional, mental, suffering, Jesus went through it all, and can relate to us and show us how to endure and how to suffer, and then to be
mm,
confident that that suffering led to victory. That it was a fulfillment of God's plan, and we can have the same confidence as we
mm.
endure through our suffering, that God has allowed in our life, confident that God is going to be victorious over all of it. So I would like to share one last scripture that
Yes,
just came to
please.
mind. So in Proverbs 16 verse 1, I think it's the Good News translation, but it
Okay.
says, we may make our plans, but God has the last word. And I love that African worship medley that includes God has the final say.
Yeah,
Jehovah has the final say. I love that song because it's such a happy, victorious song of,
yeah.
in the end, God has the last word. All the suffering's going to disappear. All the wrongs are going to be made
Mm.
right. And we're
Uh,
just going to be dancing around because God has the final say. His victory is sure. It's already a given. That's what we have to look forward to. And I think things like that can bring a little joy and spring to our step as we're
yes.
walking through the trials of life, being confident that God is going to have the final say. In the end, eternally, we're going to get to experience perfection, no more suffering, no more pain, and be in that throne room ourselves,
Yeah,
hearing the angels worship, hearing the nonstop praises of God. It's going to be incredible.
that's awesome. Thank you so much. We just did that song on Sunday at church.
Oh,
God has the
fun.
final say. It's a super fun song to dance to sing to. I love it. But that's awesome that it's so true that in the moment it's like, how do I get through the suffering? But taking it a step further or deeper of thinking like, no, it's not just getting through the suffering, it's that the suffering is going to lead to something greater. Because I can struggle with insecurity with pain because it reminds me that it's just another imperfection,
Mm,
just something else that can slow me down on a day-to-day basis. But to turn that, but to instead have the perspective and to think like, this is something I can be confident in, that God is going to get the victory through the suffering and the pain. So thank you so much. You definitely are a living testimony of faith. And I always so admire your just gentle spirit and your faith, your calming spirit, and being able to continue to smile and laugh. And I see now how you are able to smile and laugh, that your joy really does come from just deep trust in God, and like deep just love for God and his word and for Jesus, and staying close to Jesus through it all. So thank you so much for being
thanks
here
for
today.
having me.
Oh my goodness, you are welcome anytime on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It's really such a blessing. And thank you so much for everyone who is listening. I would just encourage you, if there's like one thing that you could take away from this episode that you can write down, or a scripture that you could hold on to, or a thought that you could take with you for the rest of your day in helping you have just a deeper faithful perspective, in remembering that you're not alone, that we have this community and we have God and we have Jesus. And I'm just so grateful for that. And as always, please like, subscribe, and if there's anyone you thought about while you were listening today that thinking like, oh, this would be helpful for my friend going through a hardship, like please pass it along to continue to inspire one another to not give up, to have faith and find hope in God. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, bye.